we are going to get started on a spotlight of women's football and talk about the time is now. And I mean, we all know what type of football we're talking about here, right? Yeah. Yes? Yes? What is that? Oh, someone says soccer. That's what they call it here in the States. Yes. So football, soccer, but that's what we're going to talk about. We've got an esteemed group of folks who are going to come up and share with us, and we're excited to talk about all that's happening in this space. This is really, I mean, you talk about all of the sports that are emerging, but this is a sport that is not emerging. It's a sport that continues to explode all across the world. And, you know, the ability to understand the popularity of soccer, aka football, aka soccer, whichever one you prefer, it is the most popular sport in the world, bar none. So that's what we're going to talk about next. We have a keynote address from Debbie Hewitt, and so we're going to bring Debbie on to have that keynote that's going to happen for us right on the screen.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to participate in the SIGA Summit on Female Leadership in Sport. For me, it's both an honour and a privilege to be asked to contribute, and specifically to briefly share my journey as a business leader, the lessons I've learned along the way, and more recently, on my experience in sport. As a kid growing up in the north of England in the early 1960s, I had the unusual, but now I realise invaluable experience of having a mother who worked full-time. Whilst all the other kids at my school typically had a mum at home and a dad at work, my mum went back to work as Inspector of Taxes almost immediately after I was born. And so it was that I had my very own role model of a successful working woman, except at the time, it was something that often made me feel decidedly odd amongst my peers, rather than lucky. Fast forward to my teenage years, and there was no doubt that my mum's experience as a working woman had influenced me, probably subtly at the time, to believe that any opportunity was open to a woman. And it's now no surprise, as I look back on my career, to find that I often took on roles that were not, shall we say, the norm for women. But to me, having a role model that told me otherwise, impossible became nothing. In the early days of my career, I was obsessed with business and the financing of business. And that curiosity drove me to explore careers in commerce. My first role as a store management trainee with the retailer Marks & Spencer gave me a tremendous grounding in customer service and the crucial value of an organisation that looked after its people. The importance of being customer focused is even more valid today than it was then, given that customers have so much more choice, but even more so, the lesson that the engagement of your people is one of the biggest differentiators of the success of any organisation. Winning the hearts and minds of your people in good times and not so good times is what, for me, often separates exceptional and average business leaders. A change of direction into the car industry with a company called Lex in the early 1980s saw me face some of my biggest business challenges. I learned how to read a P&L and a balance sheet, or rather I was forced to learn after I made some fundamentally poor decisions that showed I didn't really understand the difference between cash and profit. During that time, I had a boss who promoted me into a role which I arguably did not have the experience for. And although not easy initially, it was his support and mentorship that not only ensured I survived, but thrived. Another great lesson. As a business leader, I think it's our role not only to take a risk on people we see as having talent and potential, but to support, coach, and mentor them when we give them that opportunity. There's no doubt in my mind that without his mentorship, I would never have succeeded in building the business career I have today, which reinforces exactly why the SIGA Women Global Mentorship Programme is an important initiative to support the development of women in sports leadership. The power of football is unique. It's the world's biggest sport with over 3.5 billion fans. It's an opportunity to be a force for good in society, And arguably, the opportunity in football is unique. The opportunity to lead the board of one of the biggest and oldest football associations in the world was an opportunity that I relished. I never really thought about being the first woman in its 160-year history. I thought about the experience I bring, the opportunity it gave me to shape the future, and the personal development that I could get along the way. It was only when the appointment was announced and I saw the reaction that I realised the significance of being a woman and the extent to which I might inspire other young girls. But if there's one piece of advice that I wished I could have given my younger self, it would be that my attitude to the tough times that I face will be a critical factor in determining just how successful I can be as a leader. It remains for me to commend SIGA for its efforts to promote good governance, sports integrity, and greater gender equality in sport, and to hope that you all enjoy the conference.
All right. Thank you so much, Debbie. I mean, if you're not inspired by that message and the fact that change is happening every day, and we are showing up and having first, but we need to make sure our first stop being first and we can have more people at the table. So we're excited to now have the panel that's going to spotlight for us the opportunities to globalize and commercialize the sport of football. And we've got an esteemed group of folks here, so we're going to ask them to come in. But Ali Ayers with NWSL, Allison Giordano with the Senior Vice President of Global Sponsorship and Consumer Marketing, Sarah Walsh, Head of Women's Football and Women's World Cup Legacy and Inclusion Football in Australia, and Victoria Kovney with the Vice President of One Football, and our esteemed moderator who you have seen throughout the day, Emmanuel. So we're excited for them to kick us off and get started.
Affairs in Europe,
all the right
where
places
2-3 years ago the NWSL was.
wide in
My
south of
phone
France.
dies.
I think they're all chatting away, maybe.
Oh,
So,
we're missing one person.
talk to me, Nicole.
Okay.
Oh, here they come.
Ah, there she is. You were looking for her.
Hi. Allie and Allie. Yeah.
Maybe I'll go over here.
Yes,
Nope, I guess we'll have
Be
Allie
the
next to
Allie.
Allie.
Well, it is now my honor and privilege to moderate this debate on a topic of which I know little. Football, or as they say in this country, soccer. And we have here a stellar lineup of female executives from all sides of the industry. I think Sarah is joining us from Australia. Sarah, are you with us?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hope everything is well in Australia. And we are excited to join you later this year for what promises to be the best World Cup ever. Thank you very much. Here, playing at home, we have Alison Giordano. And we also have two other female leaders who are giving us the pleasure of sharing some thoughts, provocative thoughts, I would say, and try to look ahead of the curve and try to imagine and influence the course of this great sport called soccer, women's soccer. But to start with, I would like to begin with Sarah and ask her, what are we supposed to witness in the next World Cup? What is the legacy that you envisage leaving behind? How it will transform the industry and push the industry beyond what is the perception of all of us, which is a fast-growing piece of the industry with global appeal, with unrivaled popularity, and how Australia and New Zealand will contribute to that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, look, we won the rights to host the Women's World Cup, which is the biggest, women's sporting event in the world. And for us here in Australia, it's going to be as big as the last major event we had here, which was the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And ironically, we actually also have the Sydney Summer Olympics in 2032 here, in Brisbane. And so for us, when we won the rights to host, we set up a bold legacy plan. And, it kind of coincided with the pandemic. So we, in a lot of ways got lucky where we were in this position to rebuild the sport as it should have been prior to COVID. And we're talking about gender equity, we're talking about inclusion, and always having an intersectional lens when we think about, bettering the game for women. And our bold plan is really about making sure that football here in Australia has advanced both economically and also socially as a result of hosting the Women's World Cup. And, 3 years on, I'm proud to say that we've brought an extra 288 million into the game through federal and state funding, on top of what they committed to support us to host the Women's World Cup. But also we've been able to fast track a lot of our measures around social inclusion. So in the all abilities space, the cold space, First Nations communities, but also women, what we're talking about today. We don't see women as an inclusion space, but within our legacy plan, we have a very bold target of reaching 50-50 participation. And much like the US, we actually operate in a very competitive sporting market. So football is the number one played sport at a club participation level, but it's not the most watched sport. So with the Women's World Cup on our shores, we're leading with our women's teams, particularly our Matildas, to be a part of something big. The Women's World Cup is expected to have 2 billion viewers and also 1.5 million attendees at matches. That is absolutely huge. So we're looking forward to having USA here. They're going to be in New Zealand. We're obviously hosting with New Zealand. We've split the matches, but it's going to be an exciting time.
I could not agree more. And I also noted with great satisfaction the legacy that you are building. How is this impacting in today's society in Australia and New Zealand? You see more businesses supporting football? Do you see more athletes, more women, more girls practicing football? How is this changing the whole country in terms of investment, in terms of global business opportunities, job creation, wealth, and the distribution effect?
Yeah, well, just for note, FIFA are actually running the event, so they're responsible for the volunteer sector, all of the job creation that will come from the delivery of the event. Separate to that, legacy that sits with us is really about, as you discussed, making sure that we're kind of reshaping the narrative, the way in which women's football here operates. And there's probably two parts to that. One is driving more engagement from women in our game. That's either through administration, coaching, refereeing, playing. We actually have constituted 40-40-20 on our board, which is actually quite unique in the sporting sector, which means more often than not we have 50% women on our board. That has completely changed the way that we operate as an organisation. It's really important. I think the second thing is what's shifted is the way that we commercialise women's sport here and women's football, And I do think football's leading the way. We really don't have any properties left for our women's national team. What an amazing place to be, having to create new properties and assets to be able to bring new partners on for our women's national team. We have Sam Kerr, who has absolutely raised awareness for this team along with her teammates. But for us, it's about, for a long time, women's sport has kind of been, followed the progress of men's, but, there's a lot of unique things about the women's football consumer and fan. And that's not necessarily talking about women's fans of women's football. It's actually men and women and kids and families. And we've really tapped into that to be able to reshape the narrative and the way in which ROI is measured and valued for our women's football. And this is really, really important because by doing that and talking about social engagement and not just the usual metrics around, match attendance and broadcast viewership, although our numbers are as good as our men's in that market, merchandise sales are so much higher than our men's football fans. They're a really sticky consumer. They are more engaged, and we've been able to capture that in the value that we can offer to partners. And we are leading the way in Australia, and US soccer have been doing that for a long time. And so it's been really exciting to be able to reshape how women's football is, I guess, positioned and valued within the commercial sphere.
That's outstanding. Ali,
Which
we are
one?
here. We are here. Also the vice chair of SIGA. But on MasterCard, we heard Sarah addressing the social impact, the community impact, the fan engagement, all the legacy that you leave behind, the footprint that you leave behind after a tournament of this magnitude. And MasterCard is undoubtedly one of the most active and influential and significant sponsors in the world of global sport. What exactly do you aim for? What are the criteria that you select in order to choose the properties that you sponsor, or the values that you associate your brand with?
No, it's a great question. And Sarah, thanks for dialing in at, I'm not sure what time there, but appreciate your participation. We can see her here this way. We're looking here as well. No, it's a great question. We have a rich history in women's sport, men's sport. For us, it is about the values. We've heard a lot about values today. And as I mentioned kind of at our opening, ESG is at sort of the heart of MasterCard, whether it's environment, social equity, and good governance. And so those things all play into the mix when we're looking at partners, when we're identifying the right ambassadors that are going to be out there representing our brand. And it goes both ways, right? Because they're brands as well, and they want to make sure that they're aligned with companies like ourselves or others that also align with them. And we've heard that from a number of athletes that we work with specifically. So for us, it's, acting with integrity. Are there specific causes or areas that they're really focused on, whether it's small business, whether it's youth development, whether it's really being a voice for gender equity or LGBTQ. So all of those different things that we as an organization invest in and focus on, whether it be on the society front, whether it be in the commercial or market front, or even with our employees, those same values are what we look for on the property side and on our ambassador side, and governance being a key thing specifically on the property side.
That's really interesting. The following question I would like to ask you is, undoubtedly, MasterCard has been a leading light in this space. Also, the association with SIGA has been paramount to influence positively the global business community. What advice would you share with other global brands so that we can have them also at the forefront, pushing for greater integrity, greater diversity, greater inclusion, enhanced governance at all levels of sport, so that sport can truly fulfill its role and its undeclinable society in today's society in a global economy?
Yeah, I think the last part of your point is what's so critical is sport plays such an important role kind of at the forefront of driving culture. It impacts norms across the board, how women and men are depicted can impact what girls and boys think about roles, whether it be gender or what a girl can do and can't do. So the idea that brands have the opportunity, as well as the larger ecosystem, because it's not just the brands, it's media partners, agencies, the properties themselves. Everybody has a part to play. And for me, it's again, if you're aligned with the like-minded organizations that have that same vision, that same mission, and then it's really, stepping in, right? We've talked about, if you can see her, you can be her. There's an organization managed by the ANA here in the United States called See Her, and it's fabulous. Or if you look at what the UN's trying to do with really establishing, removing bias from, marketing, activations, but also how do we raise the visibility, right? So if you, I think as organizations, if I'm talking to brands, you all have your own value system, right? There's all things that you're focused on, whether it's, areas of focus on the mission side, whether it's areas of focus that your specific audiences you're trying to reach. Women's sport is a business opportunity. It is not charity. It is, you heard Sarah talk about the brand she's working with and how, audiences that are engaging that community that is following women's sport, they're first movers in technology. They are engaged, they follow brands, and they actually support those brands that are supporting the things that they love and they care about. So from a brand perspective, tapping into that makes perfect sense. And how can we then accelerate things by bringing content, giving visibility to these amazing athletes, whether that's spotlighting them through content, telling their stories off the pitch. There's so many opportunities. We're just really at the start of this, even though we're not. There's so much more opportunity to go. And so I'd say put your thinking cap on. What you do with men's sport isn't it's not necessarily apples to apples. Take chances. There's just a rich audience out there to reach. And I hope you join MasterCard and the other brands that are here, and Ally's other partners like Ally Bank and Verizon, et cetera, that are really taking the charge in this area.
Excellent. We will follow up with contacts with all these brands so that we can increase the volume and increase the dynamic. And keeping the conversation within the business element of women football. Victoire, what a wonderful name. Stands for victory. No doubt it has an influence on from your father and your mother on the sporting side. But question is, how do you see from your lenses the challenges and also the opportunities that football is facing these days? 6 years or after the FIFA gate and the tsunami that completely swept the industry, not just football, not just the sports organizations, but the whole industry, affecting everyone. How do you see this? How also can One Football contribute to enhance the reputation, the integrity, the credibility, without which there is no investment, there is no sponsorship, there are no fans?
Thank you for that question. And I will say that the FIFA Gate, if anyone watched any of the documentaries, there's no women whatsoever. So I always say, okay, well, then maybe we were the solution all along. So a little bit of hope and faith for the future. But as a football fan my whole life, and speaking about my parents, my little sister and my mother are here with me, and we've all been very big football fans from a young age. I'm half Greek, half Argentinian, 100% Argentinian when it comes to football, especially after the last World Cup. And, I've never felt as a consumer that football was for me as a woman. I was ushered into football by my older brother, who took me to a stadium at the age of 5. And I fell in love with a sport that was never for me. Going to a stadium wasn't an experience I would ever thought for me. Consuming football or even speaking about football is not something that is done for women. And so now my new position at One Football, which for those who don't know is one of the biggest media companies in the world, reaches over 500 million football fans every month, so really, really big. I am more than ever focused on a few steps back, which is really the understanding how can we look at this new product, women's football, which is not new, but now is becoming more and more popular, and how can we really sell it to women? Because I think that today a lot of what's happening is that we are selling women's football the same way we've done with men. And we're looking at going to a stadium and thinking about what a man needs to go to a stadium, and we don't think about women. And there's small things like serving oatmeal lattes in a stadium that would go a long way to make, I know, it's the smallest thing, right? But it's like those things that really like move the needle. And to me, I'm really trying to understand how can we change this perception. And so obviously what happens on the pitch is very important, but what happens off the pitch is almost as important. And these old school perception that football is only for men needs to go before we do anything else. And how do we do that? And so that's a question I ask myself every single day. I ask my team every single day. I challenge all the brands that I work with every single day, because I really do believe that if we find an answer, then we're going to be looking at a much bigger financial opportunity and a much bigger future for women's football in general. There's an example that I love to use, which is cigarettes. In the 1920s, cigarettes were a product that was for men. Actually, women that smoked were really badly seen. It was a sign of a low class if you were a woman in the 1920s smoking. And so at some point, someone, probably a man, said, wait, we could make more money if we sold it to women, right? Because it's the other half of the world. And they had this problem that they had caused themselves, which they had built a product for 50 years or whatever amount of time that was only for men. And so they essentially started creating content, and they went to Hollywood and they went to a fashion magazine, and they sold this idea that smoking was a sign of independence for women. And they came up with this brilliant campaign called Torches of Independence. And you had this women, this actresses smoking in films, and that meant that if you smoked, you were independent. Thankfully, women's football has nothing to do and doesn't give you cancer. So we're in a much better place. But I think that this change of perception, this marketing campaign, this rebranding needs to happen urgently, so more women feel like they can belong to a sport, right? And so I've been going to a stadium, but my little sister doesn't go to a stadium. For whatever reason, we don't know what happened with her, but she didn't get the football bug. And so how do I make my 19-year-old little sister care about football? Is it about telling her more about Sam Kerr and what she does off the pitch, or what she wears on the pitch? What is it? What are those questions? So that, to me, is the number one thing. And then I will close it out by saying that, and another analogy I like to use a lot, which is shampoos, right? So football is a product that, if men or women play it, is exactly the same. Same as shampoo, right? Shampoo washes your hair. Now, if you go to any big company in this world, Procter & Gamble, they have specific teams that create formulas and shampoos and sell it to men, and then the same but for women. And usually, on the women's side, you have a lot more women creating those products. And so to me, it's really, really, really important that we make more space for women to be making these decisions. And I'm very fortunate to be on the board of Women in Sports Tech, who we have here in the back. They've been doing this for a long time, which is telling women that they, first of all, can be a part of it, right? They can be a part of the table. They can build this incredible careers and get to the forefront of it. I was very lucky because I had a mom that never cared about her gender and did everything that she wasn't allowed to do. And so
Well done, Mom.
Yeah, you need a clap. You need a clap for that. But then essentially also inspired me to do the same. And now I'm 6 months pregnant with a little girl, of course, because I wouldn't have anything else. And I took her to a stadium. I ushered her into football, which is something that when it hit me, I was like, my brother took me to stadiums, but now I'm taking my daughter. So obviously something is changing.
Something is changing. Now, the key question is, when will we have a woman running for the presidency of FIFA? Or UEFA, or CONCACAF, or CONMEBOL, or AFC?
That's a great question.
That is the question. Because we have been talking here a lot about ambition, all right? I think it's time to walk the walk and make things happen, because sport, and football in particular, cannot be left in the 19th century. You said it well. It is not a male-dominated sector. It should not be. How long do you think we have to wait until we see that happening?
I don't really think it's about the time. It's not about 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. As I said when I started speaking, the people that made the mistake were all men back then. And not that I have anything against men. You guys helped me be who I am today, and I have a lot of men to be grateful to. But I do believe that bringing diversity of thought, and in this particular case, women, into organizations like FIFA, like UEFA, at this point in time is probably the smartest thing that they could be doing. And it's the smartest thing not because it's the right thing, but because it's the right business move. Women represent the other half of the world. They represent billions and billions of dollars that have been never touched. And so I don't think a man can make sure that they go out there and get all those billions into all these organizations. And so having a woman in power will help a lot because she will be there defending and making sure that they give the space that they need at every level. And that is not only for organizations like FIFA and like UEFA, but it's also in the brands. I mean, obviously, you're a great example of that. I don't know if you were a man, you would have chosen so many female properties. And that's not because men do things wrong, it's just because it's not their experience. They don't understand it, it's totally fine, no hard feelings. But the diversity of thought at the end of the day, I think, changes.
So watch this space, follow her, something will happen. It's not a question of time. But change is in the air, fast-growing sport in the land, that is women's soccer. What's the secret behind? And how is the National Women's Soccer League paving the way to turn the corner, to not only address the challenges that were inherited, but to maximize the opportunities to continue to grow, and taking into account that US, Mexico, and Canada will host the next World Cup? What is the impact that we can expect to see in soccer in this country so that it can be at the top of the chain together with other traditional leagues and other traditional sports who have dominated for so many years this country's landscape?
Great question. I don't really know where to start.
I didn't pay her to say that.
I think the biggest thing, and we all heard from Commissioner Berman earlier, is Commissioner Berman's leadership. She joined us a little under a year ago, so her 1-year anniversary is quickly approaching. And in that year, the transformation of the league has been incredible. I've been here for just over 2 years, and it is a completely different organization. You think about, if I could take a step back the way you kind of said, taking a step back as an organization and looking at how a business is run, she completely overhauled that. So when I started, there were 19 people in the league. The front office of the league staff is now about 35 people. We're talking about hiring our first ever CMO, Julie Haddon, earlier this year. That's incredible. We haven't had somebody in a marketing capacity at the league for so long. We've relied on our partners to do the marketing for us with their media buys and the campaigns that they run and the content that they do with athletes. So, thinking ahead and how we're planning on putting our best foot forward with the Women's World Cup this year and Paris 2024 next year and everything that we have in front of us, it's really exciting. Mm-hmm. From a commercial perspective, we're really excited to work with our partners around ways to maximize that partnership and make sure that they see value, mm-hmm. but also creating a league that is worthy of the incredible talent that we have here. I mean, we've got some of the world's best female soccer athletes. Take female out of it. We have some of the world's best football players.
Yeah, you have Marta, for example, who is an icon in women's soccer. And God knows how many times she won the FIFA award for best female footballer.
Yeah.
So it's a prime example. The other thing that not surprises me, but I took notice of is the level of trust of the global community and the sponsors at the first row regarding the league. You know, they don't give up. They want to be there. They want to be present. They want the support. They want to encourage and stimulate all the great reforms that you are undergoing. That must feel really rewarding, doesn't it?
It does. I think that something that I was firm on when I took my job, and I oversee business development as well as partner marketing for the league, is doing business with the right people, good people that are in it for the right reasons. Ali mentioned this not being a charity case. It's not. For us, it is a professional sport, top quality talent and entertainment, and Along the way, we have, as processes and policies were put in place, reporting systems were put in place, things came to light. I think allowing our partners to feel a part of that process and partnering with us. Our partners have all been around far longer than the league. We are about to kick off our 11th season. The policies and procedures that they have on the HR side, on the reporting side, they've been incredible allies and partners to the league beyond just being a sponsor, but helping us to improve some of the most basic business functions that you often don't think about when you think about the way a league is run. So that's...
Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about the SIGA Universal Standards and the SIGA rating system, because that has been a game changer for the industry, and we want to encourage more sports organizations to show that they are really fit for purpose. That trust is not earned without evidence. And what can be said about US sports leagues can be said about leagues all over the world, because it is a very complex reality, and the leagues are, and the clubs and the whole industry is confronted with new, emerging, sophisticated challenges that require also new approaches and always best practice. This is what we stand for, and this is what we're committed to do, working with everyone. And of course, the National Women's Soccer League is one of many that we would like to enhance our cooperation with. But because we are here talking about football, and because we are just a few months away from the world's greatest football tournament in the world, Sarah, who's going to win?
That's tough. Look, I have to start with the Matildas. They've been really on the right path. They just won the Cup of Nations here. Probably talk about some of the good competition that the Matildas will have. Obviously, the US, they're looking really good after their previous matches. I think England looks very, very good, particularly under the new coach. They're looking fantastic. And look, Spain were out here. We beat Spain, but you know, the usual European powerhouses are looking very good as well. But yeah, hopefully we see the Matildas, you know, doing well at the back end of the tournament.
Great.
In front of a home crowd.
We will be following attentively and passionately as true diehard fans. And while I was listening to you, I was thinking to myself, what a great experience I had at Wembley in 2019 in the match between England and Germany, which was won by England. Congratulations, Katie. And we went. It was last year.
2022.
That's a detail. That's a detail. But what is interesting is was let's say the grand entrance of Debbie Hewitt as chair of the FA, and Katie alluded to this. You know, it is the oldest football association in the world, modern football, because the Aztecs or the Mayas could challenge that. You know, there is a certain controversy on who invented what we call football in Europe. But no doubt it was a great dynamic and a great impulse to the sport. But I wanted to ask you a question, because we have been talking about female leadership, about the transition between the pitch, and you were, and we always be one of the greatest stars in world football as an athlete. What advice would you give to those who are hanging the spurs, if that happens, or the boots, and transition to the boardroom and have now the responsibility that you have to lead the way for women's soccer in your country?
Yeah, I think administration isn't for everybody. There's plenty of different roles. We actually do a lot of work with our players' union to make sure that players are ready, and they're not just thinking about that right at the back end of their career. And I had some great mentors. I was listening to the panel earlier. You know, athletes have so many transferable skills, but, you know, interestingly, you feel very confident on the pitch, but when you come off the pitch, you really don't understand your value in a business. And it took me a good 7 years to completely understand the value, you know, build up the business acumen to feel confident as a sports executive. And I like to take time with players now to really pass on those understandings, because it can be quite daunting when you finish up. And it's almost like I look back and I've had two careers. One that I started at 5 years of age and, finished at 32 and then started a new career. But that's the wrong type of thinking because you're transitioning to a new chapter and it shouldn't feel like you're starting fresh again. That's the knowledge I try to pass on. We have a lot of different programs with our players, but, I have a daughter now who's 18 months and, I definitely want her to play sport and it doesn't have to be football, although there's 20 footballs in the house, it's highly likely she'll play. Actually, tennis is pretty good, so I might push her towards that. But I think there's a lot of skills around, playing within teams that I'd love for her to have as a base level understanding, understanding discipline, leadership, collaboration. People use that word a lot. But if it's not the first thing you think of when sending an email or, setting up a meeting, these are all the skills that I learned over 20 years that are now transfer into my role.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. I see the next SIGA Global Mentorship star, Katie. She just volunteered. Yeah, you did? All right. Well done, and all the best for the organization of the World Cup. We will be there to hopefully to support you, but nevertheless to enjoy it. Ali, it's not just football, is it? It's the whole range of sports that MasterCard is involved in and supporting and driving change. And I could say so much about that, and having witnessed the relevance of MasterCard's position and stance on so many critical issues and so many critical phases of global football, and how you instigate the change, how you force this monolithic organizations to modernize the way they govern themselves and change. And of course, I'm talking about FIFA, but that's for another day. You will be in France this summer. What are your expectations for the World Cup for rugby? And
we're switching to Men's Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
I'll be in France a few times, hopefully to see Olympique Lyonnais Feminine play.
Yes.
And then, and/or Arsenal.
Yes.
So either one.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm politically incorrect. But what appealed to you to sponsor Arsenal and Olympique Lyonnais? What was the thing that drew your attention to?
I mean, we knew we wanted to get further into women's football. As you asked earlier, we have a pretty in-depth criteria that we look at when we're taking on new investments, and based on where their leadership was moving the game, how they treated the women's side to the men's side, and that parity that they were really pushing. It really made perfect sense for us to be involved in both of those organizations. Really, the leadership on both sides are really leading the way in European women's football holistically. So it really made sense for us to go there. And we actually just announced our renewal of Arsenal, and we've also have a long-standing relationship now with OL Feminine. So it's been,
well done.
They're great partners, yeah.
Two powerful brands, and no doubt they leave a mark, they leave an impact. They also benefited from great leaders who I happen to know personally. So congratulations for that, and I'm glad to see that there has been a return on your investment, and that also is related with the credibility and the popularity of sport. And speaking about that, I mean, how can we foresee the sport here in the US in 3 years' time? Where does the National Women's Soccer League want to be?
Without giving away too much.
I promised I wouldn't ask which two
dated.
new teams they were thinking. But if you want to say.
No, so we are
Sherry.
certainly looking to expand. I think we've done so at a very sustainable rate. We are looking to expand next season to 14 teams, and then very likely 2 more teams thereafter around 2026. From a professionalization standpoint, I'm hoping we're getting a further ahead on our marketing calendar and allowing partners to step in and really own some of the more exciting tentpole moments throughout the year. Now that we're able to put more effort into building a more fulsome calendar and activation opportunities beyond just the action on the field. Other than that, I think just looking forward to seeing our athletes compete on the world stage the next 2 summers and supporting them and then rallying behind their return home and hoping to build our fan base there. I think seeing the casual fan make their way over from those moments, those global sports moments, is really one of our major priorities this year and for a couple of years to come.
Excellent. We will be paying attention and supporting. And to finish this panel with Victoire, with scoring a goal. What about the commercialization of the cluster? What is the next frontier? What can we expect? We hear a lot about Web3. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence. We hear a lot about new ways of fan engagement. How far can this industry still go? And is it possible that trees can grow to the sky?
I think that we need to really focus on the foundation of this business right now. Of course, there's Web3. Of course, there's all sorts of technologies and AI. But right now, this is a new product that in 100 years we have never seen. Actually, I'm going to ask the question, any of you has been to a packed stadium watching women here? Anywhere in the world? Raise your hand. Okay. You know it's a very special type of experience. That's the future. We're going to see 90,000 people flocking to stadiums to watch women, and that's really powerful. And that is really going to be the beginning of everything else. What does that mean for the sport? What does it mean for the business of the sport? For the integrity of the sport? Because we're not, as women, first-time movers into the market. We're second, which comes with a lot of advantages. We can correct a lot of mistakes. We can do things better. And actually, women's football is already a lot more inclusive than men's football. Look at the Qatar World Cup compared to Australia World Cup. It's like night and day. And so focusing on that foundation and not forgetting that today, 80% of the audience are still men. 80% of people watching women's football are men, which means that we're making a mistake when we're selling this product. And so going back to basics, really figuring out how to include women into the sport, and ultimately using this as a vehicle for gender equality around the world. I've never felt more empowered in my whole life than when I've been inside those stadiums and I see families, little girls, little boys, who will never know what it was before that moment, who will never know that women were spit on when they were playing 10 years ago, that they weren't paid, that they had to pay to play. So we need to figure out really that foundation, and on one side, make sure it's an incredible business opportunity, which in my very humble opinion, comes across once every generation. So we're sitting on something massive. But on the second and more important side of things, and it's not about charity or supporting or any of that, but there's a reality here. Football, and I know we spoke a lot about many other sports, but football touches a lot of people. It touches 3.5 billion people. That's half of the world, which is kind of a coincidence, right? What about the other half? And so if we can utilize this vehicle to really drive gender equality, my daughter, your daughters, the women that are in this room, we will live in a much better world, and football has the power to do that. And brands are powering all of that, so.
And with this note, I would like to open the floor to the audience for some questions very briefly, because I am aware that I'm breaking every rule and breaching protocol, but
That's why you're here.
guilty as charged. Yes,
rules.
that gentleman over there.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies. Shafiq Simo from Getty Images here. This is a question probably for Allison and Victoire, maybe for you too, Allie, but we sit, I'll speak from my business, we sit in a sort of unique position in which we assist brands, properties, with any and all the movements they want to support and want to be a part of. Where I sit within sports, I'm noticing that entities outside of the U.S. are really putting their name behind women's sports in general, doing this, that, and the third to bring more visibility from a sponsorship standpoint, revenue, et cetera. Can you all speak to just a little bit about what you're seeing from a jurisdiction standpoint with European brands and properties and their association and backing of women's sports versus what we're seeing here, and what could be done more from your POV?
I can start. I live in London now. I relocated to London, discovering the Premier League and the massiveness of that world and how nothing else matters. And I must say, having spent 10 years in the US and working with the MLS as an agent as well, and being very close with the NWSL, it's crazy to see how in a very few years, and when I say very few years, we're talking 2 years, even less than that, we had the NWSL being the mecca for women's football and being the place where everyone wanted to come. And suddenly in Europe, they woke up with that match in Barcelona, Real Madrid, because Messi left. That's really what happened. Messi left, and Barcelona had to find a way to close that gap and shine a light onto their women's team, and did an incredible thing that inspired a lot of people around the world. But what Europe had that the US didn't have is brands. They had Arsenal and Real Madrid and Manchester United and PSG, brands that have been around for a very, very long time. And so I think that in terms of the sponsorship and the way that the deals are working over there, they're advancing at a much faster pace because they are not working with totally new brands. Now, I can challenge my own saying with Angel City. Angel City was a team that, without having played one single match, had tens and tens of millions of sponsorship dollars secured. And so obviously there's opportunity here. To me, I always try to sit in the middle of it and watch both sides because Americans historically have been incredible at commercializing sports. Europeans, not so much. But football is not an American sport, and it will never be. Like, that is just a fact of life. And so we need to look at the Premier League, the WSL that is doing great work as well over there to see how they're working. And I believe, and we've spoken about this a lot, and it's the most exciting thing about women's football and women's sports in general, is that there's a brand new world in terms of structuring the sponsorships and partnership. It's not, I'll give you X amount of money and you slap my logo here. No, we can do a lot more. And so I think that in Europe, they're embracing this big time, and in the US as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well said. Any other comment?
I think you covered it. I mean, the one thing I will add is there's a lot to learn. When we were late for this panel, we were having a conversation about, the experience of selling and working in sport in the U.S. versus internationally. And I think that that is an area where I hope in the next 3 years we skyrocket. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for us to learn from our peers across the pond and from our partners that have activated with, other leagues and other teams across the world. I think it's just a wealth of knowledge and opportunity for the U.S. here with the sport.
I am thinking about a man, Brian Lewis. He is currently the Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago National Olympic Committee. He is the chair of the SIGA committee, a permanent committee on gender, race, diversity, and inclusion. But I'm not thinking of him because he has all these important roles. I'm thinking of him because he has a campaign that says, the future is feminine. I do believe, listening to you, that the future is indeed feminine, that this sport has an amazing potential of growth, an amazing potential of touching the hearts and souls of people to excel themselves, to transcend themselves, to improve at all levels, to create new opportunities, and to deliver top-level entertainment to millions of people, for whom, if sport would not exist, it would be a sadness. I'm one of them. But I want to say that it has been a privilege to be here moderating. Believe it or not, it's the first time in my life in 30 years of professional sport that I'm moderating a panel. So thank you for the honor. I will remember this forever. And besides breaking the time, I hope I didn't break anything else. And thank you very much for inspiring us men to also excel ourselves. And yes, perhaps if sport would have more women in leadership, we would not be in such a messy state as we are in many cases. So thank you, keep on going, and to you, support.
Thank you. That was amazing. Can I ask everybody, stand to your feet, stand up, do a little stretch, don't hit the person next to you. We are going to take a 10-minute break, 10 minutes, go out, get some coffee, get re-energized, come back in, bring all that energy because we have the last half. As if we were in soccer, right, or football, this is halftime. We're gonna go grab something, come back in, and we've got a great panel coming up.